It's Monday morning and time for some paper talk. I've been kind of conjuring up ways to try to get all of the information from weekends into one kind of consolidated video for you guys. There's a lot of moving parts in this draft. You've got all the state league competitions going on, the under 18 comps, the Coates League, you've got the national championships, you've also got the AFL world that kind of coincides with all of this stuff, the ladder positions for teams and what that means for the draft. So in this video, I'm going to give you all the standouts from those leagues in the under 18s world. We've got the under 18 championships. As I said, there was one game at the weekend between the Allies and Vic Country. And we've also got the return of FinnO'Sullivan, a potential number one pick, and ramifications in the AFL for that number one pick, with Richmond now dropping to that spot on the ladder. And that's where we're going to start here. So what does it mean? I've had a lot of questions kind of saying to me, does that mean that Richmond are now going to take Josh Smiley? Does that kind of bump them up the list? The interesting thing with this draft is that the evenness of it, and I don't think Smiley was a runaway number one pick even before Richmond got to 18th position on the ladder. And I think with Richmond's midfield mix, if you're looking at it objectively, they've traded in Taranto, they've got Hopper in. They're both quite bigger-bodied midfielders, so it's not as if they're crying out for that Josh Smiley type, and that would sort of force them, I would have thought, to go down we'll just get the best midfielder, the most talented, the one with the most quality. And I wouldn't say that's necessarily Josh Smiley. If you look at those other options in there, FinnO'Sullivan, Jagger Smith, they're both really, really talented, kind of well-rounded midfielders. And particularly with Foss coming back, he played at the weekend, which we'll touch upon, but he's going to have some time now between now and November to put down some really good performances, and that definitely could turn Richmond's head. And there's also Jagger Smith, as I said, looming there as well. So I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that Richmond now just jump on Josh Smiley as the out-and-out number one pick. There is also the fact that Josh Smiley probably hasn't set the world on fire in this national championships. He's been solid, absolutely. He's been pretty good, but there's certainly been some other eye-catching performances that have put other players up as well. So really interesting time now, and I think the next few weeks are going to tell us a pretty big story in the draft picture, particularly at that top end. We'll move on, though, to some of the big performances in the Coates League. So we had Sandringham taking on the Northern Knights. Sandringham got a win in that game. I think the big storyline out of this game was Harry Armstrong. So he's had a really injury-interrupted, early part of the season. He wasn't really able to string any consistent games together with just some body issues. So he's only had 4 games in the Coates Talent League. But on the weekend, he came back and kicked 4 goals against the Northern Knights. He clunked some really big contested marks. If you look at his body of work over the last few weeks, he's gone 3 goals 2 against South Australia in the National Championships, and that game certainly turned some heads. And then he had 4 in the previous Coates Talent League game. So he's now gone 4 goals, 3 goals and 4 goals in his last 3. He's starting to clunk some really big marks, and he's got a massive boot on him. There was one in the South Australian game where he was about 50 out and it went through at post height. So 193 centimetres is Harry Armstrong, so he's a bit of an awkward height. I think that's probably going to be the turn-off with him. But if he keeps clunking contested marks like that and he keeps hitting the scoreboard, I think teams are going to really look for that third tall option. And given that we don't have depth of talls in this year's draft, we probably have some really highly talented ones at the top end. But I think Harry Armstrong, starting to move for that towards that top 20. He's probably somewhere between 20 and 40 at the moment. But a head-turning performance. We'll move on to the second guy that caught my eye for Sandringham. He's been really good. He's had a good body of work over the last 4 to 6 weeks, and that is Jet Harrietta. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but he's been really good over the last few weeks. He had a day out at Preston against the Knights at the weekend, 3 goals and 21 touches. And I love the way that he plays, to be honest. He has that real athleticism to run up and back down the ground. He's always creating an outnumber for his team. So he gets free, drifts into those pockets of space. But he also has a real physical presence about him. He's not just an outside player that's picking up disposals on the outside. He does come in. He's a bit of an enforcer, a bit of a barometer for the team. So I've loved his work, and well capped off there with 3 goals at the weekend. Another standout performance was in the Oakley versus Eastern Rangers game, where Josh Smiley had 26 touches and a goal for the Eastern Rangers. So didn't have a week off between the Vic Metro, Vic Country game, and another great performance there. He probably hasn't had, as I said, the best national championships, but does continue to put up performances in the Coates League. So he continues that push for number 1, but obviously the ladder positions in the AFL will dictate things a lot there. So we move on to the South Australian Football League, the SANFL. Ben Camporeale had another massive day out here for Glenelg with 32 disposals. Jacob Newton had 26 and a goal for Norwood. So he's a really interesting one. Looks like a later pick in this year's draft, but he's had some really good performances, albeit I think those South Australian small forwards have shared the load a little bit, so not any one of them has been able to stand out. You know, you've got Evan Bradley, Phoenix Hargrave, and also Newton there as well, sort of all causing chaos in that forward 50. We go to Phoenix Hargrave because he had 28 disposals for South Adelaide in a big loss against Sturt. So he's been another one that's been really impressive at that level and been able to step up in the South Australian team. And Alex Dodson, an absolute bolter that's coming hard, a really athletic ruck from a basketball background. He's had 19 disposals and 27 hitouts for Sturt. So he's one that's really starting to get talked about a lot. Just that, you know, that upside people see, over 200 centimetres, wonderful athleticism. He's a pretty good kick of the footy, moves around the ground well and picks up disposals with ease. It's not that common that you see ruckman at this level getting 19 disposals. So another great performance from him and looking like he's moving towards the top 20 in this year's draft. We'll move on next to the waffle performances, and there were some massive ones here, starting with Cody Angove, who's been a really dominant small forward at the Western Australian level, playing in the National Championships. So in this game, he's had 22 disposals and kicked 3 goals, a day out for Angove. He's one that's really moving in this 2024 draft. Another one was Hugh Boxall. So he had a massive game in the most recent one against Vic Country. I was really impressed with his productivity and his work rate in that game. Here for Claremont, he's had 32 touches and a goal. So that ability to be able to hit the scoreboard is massive. He's a 187 centimetre midfielder too. So, you know, clubs will be looking at that size and being really happy with that. Hamish Davis is another one, a forward, 190 centimetres. So he's more of that third tall, hybridy type. He had 22 disposals and kicked 2 for Claremont also. Blake Kelly, now this one caught my eye, 35 touches and a goal. He's actually a bottom ager playing for Swan District, so one to watch for next year, but that's a massive performance. Austin van der Strooif, he's one that's been playing in the Western Australia team too. He had 26 touches and a goal. Cale Guerin, now this performance is, if you're talking eye-catching, this is massive. So he's had 25 touches and 2 goals 3, plus 20 hitouts. So playing as a forward, probably taking the rucking duties in that forward half, and then being able to rack up 25 disposals. He's one I've been really impressed with in the carnival so far. He's got really good physicality, you know, that combative nature. He sort of gets in people's faces and he's able to impact and hit the scoreboard. So he's having a big one. I also checked on Bo Allen in the waffle. So he's playing senior footy at the moment. He had 16 touches at senior level and laid 11 tackles. So a typical Bo Allen performance. He's having a great year moving towards that top 10. Last up for the around the ground stuff is the National Championship. So the game between the Allies and Vic Country was a really good match actually, ended in a 2-point win to Vic Country, went down to the wire with several lead changes. The biggest story out of this game was the return of Finn O'Sullivan. He had 16 disposals, 2 clearances and 6 score involvements. So from a statistical point of view, didn't set the world on fire, but he came back, he took some centre bounces, he played a little bit forward. He's just got that beautiful movement, particularly when he picks the ball up off the ground. His motion from being able to go from ground level to out of congestion, that agility, lateral movement is really strong with Finn O'Sullivan and shows off his class. I think the 6 score involvements show off his class too. There was some really decisive kicking inside 50 that you saw with a few of his disposals, and he's a handful when he's inside forward 50, which he was a lot in this game. His teammate there in Sam Lawler, he was really good as well. Again, the stat sheet doesn't really tell the full story. 16 disposals, 3 clearances, but he did his best work inside forward 50 with 3 goals and 6 score involvements. Didn't have his best game from a midfield point of view, only the 3 clearances, and I think he had some opportunities to maybe, you know, implant himself on this game, and he maybe missed that opportunity from a midfield point of view, but he's got that forward craft. Some of the contested marking and some of the body work that he did, there were a few one-on-one contests that he just, you know, shoved his opponent out of the way. And we have seen him this year have games where he can go into the midfield and rack up 30, 35 touches. So got a big future, this guy, and definitely one that's in top 5, top 10 conversations at the moment. The big, I think, talking point from a positional point of view here was the dominance of the key forwards. Jonty Fowl. Now, he's one that was, really highly talked about off the back of last year. This season, again, with injuries and unavailability, hasn't been able to show that. But the 195 centimetre forward here was enormous. And I get, this might be too much of a throwback for some listeners, but Scott Lucas used to play for Essendon, moved like a midfielder but played as a key forward. He's got vibes of that for me. He had 3 goals in this game, 5 marks, 2 of which were contested inside forward 50, and he had 7 score involvements. Just kind of one of those players that just gets in the thick of everything. If it's at ground level, he'll go for it. If it's in the air, he'll fly for it. And stuff happens when this guy touches the footy, I'm telling you. The other one for the Allies on the other side of things was Jobe Shanahan. So one that's been in that top 20 conversation a lot, maybe top 30 conversation if you spread it a little bit more. He was big again in this game, and he's showing his contested marking is stronger than anyone else in the draft. He had 4 contested marks in this game, 3 goals and 9 score involvements, which was a game high. So his first 2 carnival games were probably so-so for him. I've talked about his ability to be able to work his way into the game, get others involved, but he's really taken the bull by the horns. He's going for those grabs, flying at everything. And I love how much he works up the ground. He gets, marks at half back, up on the logos and that sort of thing as well. So, yeah, his back end of the national championships has been huge. We've got to move on to Harvey Langford, though, because he is probably a smoky for the next segment's going to be on the Larke Medalist, and he's got to be a smoky for that with what he's putting together here. He had big numbers again with 30 disposals and 9 clearances, and people forget this guy's 190 centimetres, so he's a big guy, he's a big midfielder. I said last week in the video he gives me Jordan Dawson vibes. He's a beautiful left foot kick at the footy. He's one that storms out of the congestion, storms away from that clearance and can hit targets. He can mark aerially, he can go inside 50, and he is tracking beautifully. I think the one thing that he can work on in his game is that power out of the stoppage. Being a 190 centimetre guy, you want to have that explosiveness to come out to be able to break tackles. He probably doesn't have that strength in his game just yet, but I love his forecraft and I love the versatility of the guy. He's had a fantastic national championships. Toby Trevallia's had another great game here, playing in a bit of a unique role for him. So he played more sort of wing, high half forward, I would say, but he was still able to impact so much. He had 9 score involvements from an attacking sense. You look at his half-back work, he's still able to drift behind the ball, take those intercept marks. He gets plenty of intercepts in every game that he plays. But then in this game, he was able to show that forward half work, kicking inside 50. He's a beautiful kicker of the football, kicks on both sides of his body as well. And just that height, you look at it, 187 centimetres, plays small though as well as tall. So I talked about Angus Clark in my last video from South Australia. He's a bit of a similar player to Trevallia, and they sort of give me Will Day vibes. So I'd like to see him be kind of unleashed in the midfield. This is probably a step in that direction, playing a bit of wing. So hopefully we'll see that in the future. The others that stood out to me in this game, I wanted to, just pull into focus here James Barrett's defensive role watch. So, playing in the Coates League, played predominantly forward. He's gone into defence here and played really well, took a number of intercept marks. So that's a watch, particularly coming towards draft time for a key defender. Bottom ager here, Riley Onley. He had a day out. He was fantastic in the midfield. So one to watch for next year, definitely. And Lockie Jakes, his first probably real standout game in this national championships. He's been solid across the first few games, but this one was a really big one. Intercepting, driving, taking all the kickouts, hitting targets. So set them up really well. And they had a number of transition goals in this game. So he was a big part of that, along with, Trevallia off the wing. So we've got to do a quick Larke Medal check here. So I want to throw some names in there that I think that are right up there. I think Murphy Reid has to be very, very close, and the next game against Big Country could determine his standing in the Larke Medal. I think Ashcroft, sometimes I think he just doesn't get enough, he doesn't get talked about enough. He's a father-son to Brisbane, so he just sort of does his work. Some of it's a little, I'd always say, robotic in a way, just the way that he plays, because he, gets so much of the footy, he impacts so heavily, just does it week after week. Leo Lombard, his first 2 games were fantastic. He probably had a little bit of a quieter one in the middle, and this one again, he was brilliant. I think he had 28 touches in the game, so he's had a fantastic 4 games as well. Isaac Kako has to be right up there behind teammates Murphy Reid and Ashcroft. I think a smoky could be someone like a Tyler Welsh, who's been able to, hit the scoreboard with nearly every touch that he's had. And Jagger Smith as that guy racking them up as well as a bit of an outsider. But I think at this moment, if you called it, I'd have Murphy Reid leading with Isaac Kako second, Lombard and Ashcroft I think I would have next on the list. So we'll see how that goes coming into the last game of the championships. Upcoming, we do have Vic Country versus Vic Metro at Marvel Stadium, which is the massive final game of the national championships. That's all we'll get to see these guys, which I'm a bit sad that it's over. It feels like it's gone really, really quick. There'll be plenty of narratives in that one. We've got, there's plenty of things upcoming as well. As I said, we've got the Vic Country, Vic Metro game at Marvel Stadium, the final game of the national championships. A little bit sad that it's ended. It's gone so quickly, this championships, but there's so many narratives in that. We've got Berry versus Kako at either end of the ground. That's going to be fantastic. The small forward battle, the midfield battle, Smiley, Ashcroft, Smith, Reed against Foss, Lalor, Langford and Ivasic. I think that's going to be a beauty. And then which, key forwards are going to take control of this game. Thomas Sims has been good for Vic Metro. You've got Armstrong, who's coming into some really good form. And then you've got Jonty Foal and Whitlock there as the tools for Vic Country. So many storylines, so much going on. I hope you guys liked this kind of, news update style video. I'll try to get this out every Monday up until the draft. And we'll have plenty of other, different types of videos, explainers and phantom drafts and that sort of thing as well. So that's all I've got time for today. And I'll see you guys next time.